I'm a partner with KPMG in India, and I lead the telecom sector vertical for KPMG. I am extremely honored and privileged to be moderating this esteemed panel on a very, very important topic, and which is transforming CTO. It's a CTO Conclave, transforming technology operations to unleash the potential of 5G. The panel comprises of our esteemed guests, uh, leaders in their respective organizations, industry stalwarts who have spent more than 3 decades in the telecom sector and have been instrumental in shaping the telecom industry for India. I'm extremely honored, sir, and it is my privilege to be leading this panel. To just set a context, as telcos position themselves to make the most of the next phase of digital transformation, the role of CTOs is transforming not only the organization, but also the strategic objectives of the organization. CTOs need to not only now demonstrate leadership, but also continuous technology innovation and incubation of ideas along with the strategic business partners. The time that CTOs spend in technology innovation and strategy is also growing. There is a clear link between the amount of time and investment that CTOs are spending in not only engaging in identifying the company's objectives, but also to drive the roadmap for the future of the business. Business customers are highly demanding and they're demanding connectivity, speed, and performance. At the same time, operators expect the network to be easily configurable, easily monitorable, and also having the high level of intelligence. CTOs have a very, very important role to play, especially in the era of emerging technologies. Emerging technologies, cloud, network virtualization are now reshaping how telcos are viewing the future of the business. The future of telecom is about platforms and how they are effectively rolled out. It's about how they shape not only their own businesses, but also businesses of the enterprises. To kickstart my conversation, and to discuss about first the role that emerging tech, cloud, and network virtualization is going to play, I'll request Mr. Jagveer Singh if I could ask you the first question on emerging tech, which is what role will a telco cloud play in the current context where TSPs are not only getting ready for 5G but also transforming the way enterprises are approaching their own digital transformation. What is the role that telco cloud is going to play in driving efficiency, product innovation, and superior customer experience? Jagveer, your views, please.
Thank you, Puru. So I think first, the cloud is cloud. Let me just take you through a little bit telco cloud versus public cloud and why you're using the word telco cloud. For sure, all the telcos are also going to transform from the traditional telecommunication services to the digital service provider, where actually the cloud infrastructure becomes very important. And cloud is basically a foundation component for the telecom or for the digital. And yes, we can also use the public cloud. I think the difference between the private cloud and public cloud is slowly diminishing. However, the telcos, they certainly need the cloud, which is more reliable, resilient, and we can actually use the VNF for the services on the fly in the real-time basis. We can manage the cloud more efficiently as what the telco needs for deploying new product and services, including like we call it simple language, the tariffing, etc. So the cloud actually has to be more flexible compared to the public cloud. Public cloud is a little different where you don't have that kind of control, and you will have the more control actually when you have the private cloud. So the control in terms of monitoring, control in terms of real-time provisioning configuration, control in terms of like adding the new VNF. So, and ensuring that you have full reliability as what is required for the running the digital services or the telecom services. So this is one of the like little bit fundamental difference in the public. As I said, the difference is also going away, but many times you have to keep asking for the permission if you need any data, any configuration for the public cloud if you want to use by the telcos or digital service providers. So this is one. Second is I think the cloud by definition is going to provide the flexibility of running the services and the efficiency of the services. Going to provide the flexibility in terms of the new VNF coming in. And actually nowadays, like earlier we used to use the cloud only for like EPC or the IMS, but going forward, the cloud is also coming for the VNF like routers, VNF like firewall, which are required for the security, VNF like load balancer. Everything actually is going to be software based. You can define it in the cloud. So from that point of view, the cloud has to be really very flexible and use the software defined VNF rather than like traditional routers and firewalls and the load balancer. Now coming back, how it's going to be like allow the product innovations and the efficiencies. I think initially, as I said, the cloud is very flexible, allowing the real-time basis, the configuration and provisioning, etc., on the infrastructure. But initially, we are going to deploy NSA architecture, where mostly the use case will be around the enhanced broadband, mobile broadband, we call it. And along with that, mostly you will have new enterprise application coming in. All these applications can be supported on the current cloud what we have deployed, which we call it actually virtual application based fabric cloud, or like a VM based cloud. And this cloud is more than enough actually to support the NSA architecture. Maybe some limitation might come tomorrow for the ultra low latency services. So the use cases which are the low latency, I think for those use cases, having the virtual cloud right now need to get transferred actually or transformed to the cloud native, which will have the container based services. So there you will have actually all the low latency kind of services coming in, network slicing kind of services coming in, although can be supported on the virtual environment of today, but I think the more efficiently they'll be supported on the cloud native and the container based services. And this will allow to have the flexibility for the new services, which will be you can apply the AIML. You can actually have the various use cases around the low latency for the enterprise as well as for the consumer, including like gaming, including like surveillance, including like smart city. So I think I'm sure you will have the more discussion around that. So this is my understanding that whatever we are deploying today, we are deploying, which will enable us to actually go from the NSA to SA, and all the at least I can say, like Vodafone Idea, we are actually ensuring all applications are now the cloud based. All VNF which are coming, everything 100% is coming on cloud based for last 2 years. And going forward, whatever the physical infrastructure was there, slowly, as in when the time is coming, we are actually going away from that and deploying on the cloud.
Sure. Thanks, Jagbir. I think you laid out some very, very important points. I'll probably ask some leading questions around that in some time. But you covered one very important point about how any kind of network infrastructure is going to impact the kind of use cases that your end customers will be looking for. And when it comes to end customers, the role that digital transformation initiatives plays for the end customers is becoming very important. And the role of a CTO in the organization is also evolving, not only to manage this transformation within the organization, but also of its end customers. So, Randeep, if I may bring you in here, how are you seeing the role that you're playing, not only in transforming the organization's digital transformation initiatives, but also of your end customers, your enterprise customers that are also transforming? Are you able to break the silos and create a seamless a platform for transitioning some of these initiatives?
Thank you, Puru. I think it's a good question. I think I would like to first start with the context of the time we are living in. I think we are living in a time where COVID is always lurking. We are now currently seeing with the new variant coming again there is a disruption. What we think we had come to business as usual, which means we have to be kind of assuming it that the life will go up and down. The BAU will be sometimes very cool and sometimes will go back to restrictions and movements will be restricted. So that is one part which is given in an enterprise life. Right now, I'm not speaking from telco, I'm talking to any enterprise. Second part is your workforce is going to remain on-prem. This will also be a given irrespective of what happens to the COVID situation, even if it goes away. So which means you will have to continue to kind of have your workplace remotely. Third is we are now also seeing a supply chain disruptions, which is not normal, which was not assumed. So any enterprise looking at what they're consuming, supply chain disruption going to impact how you are able to service your customer. Fourth, I am talking about the demand shifts, which means something which you are saying is in hot demand may suddenly go down and you may not need that product and your customers may not need that product, or something else may suddenly come up as a very high demand product, and hence you may have to shift as an enterprise your focus to that. Your enterprise could be anything. It could be IT enabled services or it could be a physical service also. I mean, it really doesn't matter, or it could be a product also. And then there are these disruptors who have got more buoyed by the possibilities of remoteness and possibilities of all these things. They are coming up with newer products which are disrupting your, you can say, some domains which you took for granted. So this is what the enterprise life is. So if really speaking, enterprise, if we invert it as a telco, this is all true for telco also. So which means the role which the telco leadership plays to make ourselves efficient, resilient, and innovative for future, it becomes very important for the leadership of the enterprise to come together. If we bring it towards telco, you have to use your digital transformation technologies to see how you can kind of minimize the impact of these things which are around you and stay relevant and stay contextual. 4 building blocks, in my view. One is connectivity. I mean, we all talk about 5G as a whole, 5G as a holy grail of connectivity. Yes, it is. It brings up a lot of new possibilities. But we have fiber today. We have 4G today. A lot of sensors are still 2G based. We also have Wi-Fi. So really speaking, connectivity should be seen as a technology which solves the last mile. So that is one part. Depends upon your challenge in last mile, you will choose your connectivity. You can say what solution you will choose. Then there is cloud. I think Jitbir rightly said cloud will play a very important role because it helps you scale, it helps you deliver new skills, new services. And at one stage, which we will see an edge cloud for a low latency, probably you like to have an edge cloud where application happens to be edge, you will like to put your cloud in edge. IoT, I think around us, we are going to live in connected world. So whether it is IoT for a telco itself to solve their problems or any enterprise to solve their problems, and all this data will be then ingested into a cloud and you'll put a layer of analytics, which some people say AI, ML, cognitive, non-cognitive. These are, you are ingesting this data and creating new use cases, which could solve your safety problem, efficiency problem, productivity problem, or even new products. If you are saying, oh, I'll be innovative, I'll create a disruptive product. So all these put together, this is the challenges we are also facing today. And how are we solving this problem of scale? Suddenly the data demands have gone up, consumers are consuming more, our enterprise customers, they are working from home, hence the security which was taken for granted in an on-prem situation now has to be seen. CIOs are faced with the challenge of providing secure working environment of enterprise information security in your employee's house. So this is a new, I would say, a challenge which enterprises are facing. So CTO's role becomes that he partners with internally, let's say your CIO to and your product heads and your digital heads, depends upon what you name in your company, to create solutions around it to solve your own business challenges and also to solve challenges which are may not be technology domain, but they can be actually solved better by technology. For example, if you see you want to have a zero touch employee entry into your office, you can put technology sensors, you can put cameras, you can do edge recognition and then say, hey, employee face recognition or thermal screening can all be done using technology. So you can play a part in supporting your admin guy, how he can use the technology to solve a problem which would have been probably solved differently if you had not been a party to it. If I take it to enterprise, because we are telcos also a big time supplier of connectivity and other solutions to our enterprise customers. CTO's job traditionally in an enterprise business was delivery and assurance. Once the product has been sold, hey, Mr. CTO, with your team, please go and deliver on time and ensure that it stays up, customer experience is good. But now, because we see the solution we are talking about are bespoke, they are not the solution which are off shelf, we just go and buy and deploy. They are bespoke. You have to be like, we are three telcos here. The solution which is relevant to all of us may not be relevant to other two. So, which means within a category also depends upon your maturity and your strategy, solution will have to be bespoke. Which means the CTO will have to now go at the pre-solutioning level to your enterprise and say, hey, enterprise, what is your challenge? What technology toolkit I have? With combining this, how can I solve your challenge? So they go into a pre-sale and a value creation journey of enterprise rather than just delivery and assurance. I think this is very exciting because not only you get to see the problems of your own telco as an enterprise, you also see what other industries are facing. And we see that some industries are probably more advanced. I mean, if you really see today, OTTs and OTT driven industries are more advanced in these analytics and things, and they really solve the problem digital first and physical second. But there is also a traditional industries which are largely still physical and they do not see digital solutions solving their problem. So can the telcos be a bridge, and can CTO play a role in that and bringing the industry, Indian industry, to industry 4.0, and then in some way also bringing the solutions to be made in India, and I mean contributing to Atmanirbhar India, where we can have Indian solutions created by Indian startups and Indian telcos solving Indian industry problems, and maybe at one stage take it to the world. So I really find CTO's job is become more exciting because they are not just solving a telco problem and solving the problem which were not predicted earlier, but also helping enterprise businesses solving enterprise problems. So I think it's an exciting time for as a telco industry. From a good to have industry, we are essential industry, we are enabler industry, and I think this is a good role to play.
I like what you said, Randeep. Telecommunication is certainly an essential industry for sure. We've been talking about it in different forums for a long time now. And the role that CTOs are playing are obviously evolving. And with technologies undergoing a change, the role becomes even more exciting because you can work with the different ecosystem partners to actually deliver some of these solutions. And you mentioned the role that you are playing with not only your IT team as well as your product team who are actually trying to drive it. But with 5G coming in, this role is expected to also have certain priorities. And Sham, if I may come to you, logically talking about the transition that we are going to have from 4G to 5G, and 5G is expected to bring a wave of disruption across the telecommunication industry. Some of the benefits that we are going to see is can be only delivered if it is delivered through a virtualized environment. So, from your perspective, in the next 3 to 5 years, what are those technology priorities that you might have from from the role that you're playing in not only delivering some of these networks, but also in the right way so that the end customers' needs are actually met, the priorities and the KPIs that we might have for those customers are met. As Randeep also said, those priorities are also undergoing a change from just being a delivery-based mechanism to providing solutions which are beyond delivery. So, Sham, can you throw some light on the priorities that you are focusing on to drive these initiatives in the next 3 to 5 years?
Sure, and thanks, Guru. I think let me start with the pure play technical level. If you look at 5G, there are two paradigm shifts in the way networks going forward are going to operate. First is the amplification of the ability to drive scale and drive granularity of both connectivity as well as compute together. So that's one fundamental change that 5G will drive. And second, and I think both Randeep and Jagbir alluded to this briefly, is it will drive a very deeply automated set and systems of network management. It would be intuitive and it would be abstracted, but it will fundamentally change the way we run the network. So these are the two changes I believe that's going to happen. And if you look at the first part, the scale of supply, it will really have a far reaching impact on consumption profiles. And when I talk about consumption profiles, it is not only consuming capacity on a GB basis, it's also consuming compute. And this will happen both for individuals as well as industry and enterprise part of it, which was not the case for 4G and below, which were predominantly connectivity driven service based. And if you look at last 5 years, just 5 years on 4G, per capita consumption just on mobile data again has increased more than 150 times. What we used to do as one person per month, 150 to 100 MBs kind of thing, we are doing now 800 MBs to 1000 MBs in a day in the same country. And over next few years, this new scale which 5G is going to create, it is actually going to fork out into a number of service planes, and each one of those service planes will have its own connectivity and compute ecosystem. It will be either shared or dedicated, right from mobile broadband to fixed wireless homes to captive enterprise solutions to industry verticals. This whole capacity scenario is going to pave a path of much larger and much cohesive digital journey. And we have seen the impact of connectivity. COVID has kind of accelerated it, and we have seen this huge connectivity consumption happening. But we are yet to fully see and gauge the impact of a distributed and embedded compute that is going to get coupled with connectivity. And that change we have to see. And this, all of this on a prioritization perspective is going to get implemented, let's say, with a very open and heavy duty radio network, which is of course the fundamental tenet of 5G, on fiber, which is now again becoming an essential tenet of 5G. And this will produce multiple times more GB per unit of presence. And each one of these production units will now get closer to the customer. They will also have an embedded compute within them, which will get distributed right to the end. And this change is also then going to enable what I call as n is equal to 1 granularity, which means every service now will be accentuated by a clear demand side requirement of each individual customer, each individual enterprise, each individual function. And that granularity will be serviced by this new network. The second big shift, which is going to propel this even further, is on the way the networks are being managed today. You start with FCAP, so keeping the light bulbs on, to an almost intuitive service delivery. It will be predictive, it will be on demand, config changes, capacity, capability upgrade, features, all of them will now become almost on demand and predictive. And while each one of those will look like plug and play, the actual platforms, underlying platforms which will be servicing them, they will hide a really incredible amount of complexity. The tons of transactional data, orchestrating across layers of underlay cloud, selection of physical and digital assets, populating the right set of physical and digital assets, and then reconfiguring the whole set of functional planes. And all of this in nearly real time, still kind of processing that humongous amount of transactional data which I alluded to. Now, how do you make all of this real in next 3 to 5 years? So first of all, we need to create this new fabric, which all of us are now trying to do, which is distributed both from connectivity vector perspective as well as compute vector perspective. And in addition to this fabric, there is an underlay cloud which acts as an active infrastructure. And on this active infra, you populate the network and management functions. Jagbir alluded to some of them. Now, most of them will now come as software on a service on this active infra. And then finally, to stitch it together, there will be an extremely intelligent management plane, AI enabled, ML enabled, which will be supported by deep analytics, that is powered by network feeds, that will be powered by device feeds. The new concepts, RIC and RApps, they will create a very powerful ecosystem where this whole management plane, I believe, will now step up to being a native service delivery plane itself, which will be aware of customer, will be aware of quality, and which will continuously evolve with the understanding which it continues to get. Clear priorities again, starting with physical infra. Physical infra distribution is a must, is the most fundamental tenet of all of this story. Fiber is a must, street furniture is a must, green power is a must, edge data center, to name some of them. Then comes the whole digital fabric. How do you create an underlay horizontal cloud as an active infrastructure? And this cloud with this physical infrastructure is going to couple the connectivity layer with the compute layer. And once this is ready, then the open network functions, which are self-configuring, which are trusted and secure going forward, and which are managed by data-driven algorithms that continuously learn on the fly, and then they kind of raise the bar, and you perpetually then raise the performance standards or action standards of the network. So this is how I believe the prioritization, layered prioritization is going to happen, scaling it up, and finally delivering service.
Thanks, Shyam. I think that was quite elaborate, and I think what you mentioned very specifically about the priorities, the focus on shared connectivity is something that I'm sure that is going to be the biggest challenge that the ecosystem partners and our esteemed guests on the call from Ericsson, Nokia, and Red Hat will obviously share their views on how effectively they are working with you and to drive this vision. If on a similar note, if I could go to Magnus, uh, Magnus, if Sham, Randeep, and as well as Jagdeep alluded to the role that the network and the emerging technologies are going to play, the role that AI and ML, analytics, automation, robotics are going to play, the role that some of the new technologies are going to play for the virtualized environment. Can you share with us some learnings from your global role on some of the leading practices that you're closely working with TSPs, specifically in their end enterprise customer journeys? What kind of discussions are you having with them? Can you explain to us some successful use cases in this journey so that we can see how some of the narratives that the operators from our operator perspective are looking for have been met by some of your customers in other geographies?
Thank you, Purut. I mean, it's very inspiring to hear the all the technology that goes into the system, right, and the power that it can unleash, and not the least, then, as Randeep talked to, it's fun to be a CTO, and in particular, so embracing the enterprises, right, because here's really where I think a lot of value can be unleashed. Some 7 years ago, we started in Ericsson a then research program on how to do 5G for industries, in particular then to learn on how is manufacturing, how are enterprises working normally, not being based on a mobile system, and then see how can we bring in 5G to improve their processes. And that journey is just the start of it, of course, but it's still, I think, very rewarding in many aspects. Quite early, we started to apply this in our own factories. First, of course, with 4G, but as soon as we had the opportunity with 5G, in our Louisville factory in Texas, entirely built with 5G in mind, where we use 5G to build 5G equipment, in fact. We're now seeing 2.2 times improved productivity per employee compared to before we started to be using the 4G, 5G systems. So for ourselves, it's no way going back, if I put it that way. We had very early on an example with pneumatic screwdrivers where we sensed how often they were being used, and we quickly could then change that into a maintenance issue, or rather being proactive maintenance, so that rather than having the equipment break down, we can take them out of production and insert a new unit, touch them up with reduced repair cost and improved quality, as an example. So very often you get a knock-on effect, in this case then improved product quality that we didn't calculate with at the beginning. We've seen this on larger scales in other setups. We're supplying ports, airports, and different kinds of manufacturing setup. In one port, they are optimizing the route for the automatically guided vehicles that drive the containers, and some range 10 to 20% improvement by just being able to dynamically plan the routes, and thereby extending their usage and making sure that we have high efficiency in the port. And needless to say, overall, we can reduce the time a ship spends in port, thereby increasing the billable time for the shipper. So I think a key thing here is really to get into the process. Perhaps as a last example, the 3 major airports in Paris are now being digitalized with our systems. And it's a huge undertaking. The number of things you can do here, I think, will continue for a long time, right? But as a first step, you connect the people. You make sure they have a private communication system. In these 3 airports, 120,000 people work. So that's a fairly sized private network in its own. So that's a task by itself. But Not only that, of course, then you need to manage different groups of communication. The air traffic controller certainly has priority over some other staff, etc. Once you've done with that, you can just continue. You can start to include sensors on different parts of the airport, optimize dynamically changing the gate for an aircraft, routing the people to the right gate, routing the luggage to the right gate, optimizing flow, etc. Key thing here is to become data driven by adding information points, which we easily do with a wireless system. You can derive, extract more data, and then apply, as we heard before, with AI ML algorithms, higher values. The more observability you have, the smarter you can become, the more you learn. And with an airport, which is a huge factory with different classes of information and different integrity, security provisions, etc., I think it's a great kind of setup to get into, where truly the wireless systems like 5G, or in particular 5G, with its provisions for resilience, robustness, and security, is an excellent solution. And it's lots of innovation to undo there and really to hit the ground. And as a closing remark, I'd say, talking here in India, I think now a number of trials have been done on 5G. We've seen the great performance in the field with already commercial devices which are sold already in India. It would be fantastic if we could get clarity on the spectrum licensing conditions and could start to know when we can execute on that, so that at the end the innovation power can be used by enterprises here in India.
Thanks, Magnus. Very encouraging to hear that you've actually seen phenomenal results of some of the use cases being developed. I picked up the ones around improvement in production efficiency for sure, which is a very important problem statement that private networks are being effectively enabled by organizations like yourself. But just sticking to the architecture question, because that's a very, very important question in any kind of deployments. Abhay, if I can come back to you on when it comes to rethinking the architecture and the futuristic architecture, which is going to be virtualized, has been enough discussed on this particular call on how the network architecture is going to be very, very critical, virtualized, and also shared. What are some of the learnings, leading practices that you have been discussing with customers? And in this case, your customers are obviously not only operators, but also end enterprises, because you are working with operators to service some of those enterprises. So can you share some examples around these with us? And I'm sure that, with the testings that have actually happened in India, you will have some learnings that you can replicate in the Indian context as well.
Thanks, Bro. So fundamentally, if I have to talk about learnings and leading practices that we see happening globally, I can call out three big fundamental changes that we are seeing. Number one is evolving or evaluation of as a service model. The reason why I call upon it is we heard Jagbir talk about the cloud infrastructure requirement. Now, the technology of the virtualization has been changing very, very fast. We were in the VNF world till 1.5 years back. We moved to CNF-A, and now we are talking CNF-B. Fundamentally, CNFs on virtualized virtualized machines, and now we are talking CNFs on bare metal. Now, at this pace of technology changes, you have only two choices to make. One, either you have very good manpower and skill upgradation happening with to your manpower in order to keep up pace with that technology, or the alternative is to go as a service. So this is one trend that we have seen, and here I don't have to talk about the importance of as a service more, because my colleagues, both Shyam and Randeep, and my boss, my guru earlier, Jagbir, we were all four in Airtel at the point in time in 2004, 2005. when Airtel started the concept of Erlang as a service. Now, nobody heard of that kind of a thing. In 2 years time frame, we talked about in Airtel, we came across towers as a service. So the power of bringing these kind of things as a service can be phenomenal. So it becomes difficult for me to explain it to rest of the CTOs when I talk to them. But for people who have been in Airtel, I think this is an easy thing to talk about. That's one trend that and one learning that we have been seeing. If we cannot keep our manpower skills upgraded to that level, it's best to go with as a service model. The second big learning or leading trend that we are seeing, and we heard Shyam talk about it. See, the fundamental difference that CNFs bring onto the table is open APIs, both open APIs for management and open APIs for service, which basically means the important aspect here, what we have to look at is automation by design. We have always looked at automation as an afterthought when we used to work till the 4G era. But here, if we have to make the best use of the virtualization world, it has to be automation by design. And what do we mean by automation by design is you have to design, deploy, operate, and assure all the 4 aspects of every service that you want to do has to be completely automated, and it has to happen by design day one, not as an afterthought. So that's the second learning or leading practice that we have been seeing happening across in the market. Everybody goes for service orchestration day one along with 5G SA. The third learning that I see, which is very, very prevalent, and we heard Randeep talk about it, is related to developing an ecosystem. Now, enterprise, they want use cases. They want, and that is the value that CSPs need to provide to the enterprise. Connectivity, they have always been providing. But if you have to move up the value chain, it is the use case. Now, for developing the use case, you need a developer ecosystem. And this is one, so till date, what has been happening, some use cases are developed by people like Nokia, Ericsson, so on and so forth. Some of the use cases are developed by the CSPs themselves. But the time has come when we create a developer ecosystem which is capable of creating use cases which are relevant for the enterprise, and they use all the open APIs that the underlying layer is going to provide. So top 3 learnings and leading practices: evaluate as a service model, to look at automation by design day one, and 3, develop and create a developer ecosystem. That's what I will summarize. Thank you.
Thanks, Abhay. I think this is something that we can all learn from how the cloud infrastructure environment and some of the SaaS companies have actually developed their own solutions, and the ISV ecosystem that has been created where there has been continuous innovation and deployment. And when it comes to open innovation and the use of open technologies, I would now like to move to Azhar. Azhar, I saw you really excited when Abhay was actually talking about how the open API architecture is getting conceptualized and integrated, and some of these priorities. If I can take your views, when we talk about the futuristic architecture and how the technologies are getting deployed, the role of Open RAN in the wider context cannot be ignored. In the Indian context, obviously, we have a lot of a brownfield implementation as compared to greenfield implementations of the Open RAN networks. Not many success stories have been actually heard in the brownfield kind of deployments. But I'm sure that from your global experience and the work that you have been doing, you have been discussing some unique differentiators, unique propositions for Open RAN, and it'll be very interesting to hear your views on how this is going to be seen from an Indian context and some of the learnings that you can share with us from a global context.
Thank you, Puram. Thank you very much. I think there were, first of all, thank you to the other panelists for establishing certain points here. One, I think cloud as a basis for transformation. Two, the speed of innovation is extremely important, and the challenges the CTOs face today. Three, the ability to use latest and greatest technologies to create a self-organizing architecture. Now, if you look at all of these three components, and then apply that in terms of how the infrastructure transformation is happening, then you can actually see that cloud technologies and cloud presence is not just limited to the core. It's migrating more towards the subscriber and more towards the consumer. I think Sham hinted on that a little bit in terms of connectivity and compute convergence. Now, how is that connectivity and compute convergence really happening? It's through the infrastructure that's actually being built out closer and closer to the subscriber. So, which means you can now extend the cloud platform further out into the infrastructure, into your radio access network, into the RAN, and closer, so that you can provide the level of services. The other point that was also established on the panel was 5G is all about enterprise services, not just consumer grade services. 4G was all about consumer grade, 5G is all about enterprise. So now what needs to happen in order to deliver that innovation, and in order to deliver those capabilities that the subscribers are really looking for, and these new use cases and the autonomous infrastructure capability, you absolutely need to migrate cloud-like capabilities or cloud-like platform, extend that cloud platform into the RAN. Then the question becomes, okay, so what's the difference between a traditional RAN and an open RAN? An open RAN is where you can potentially, it's a disaggregated RAN architecture, and you can potentially take components from different vendors and put that as best of breed solutions to the subscribers. Now, Puru, you raised a good question in terms of how's that relevant in the Indian context, particularly in the brownfield deployments. What I have seen, I've talked to providers all over the globe, and although Open RAN was a concept that was first, marketed heavily or adopted heavily by Rakuten, because it was a greenfield and it was very easy for them to do. Now, subsequently, it has caught on. First, the amount of conversation that has happened at ORAN Alliance to be able to get those standardized set of open APIs, which Abhay briefly alluded to, it was important to actually get Open RAN functional within the infrastructure. Once that happens, now we're seeing providers like Verizon, TELUS, Bell Canada, actually deploying a split RAN architecture based on a cloud platform, so that they can then mix and match some of those components. While it's probably we are not there yet fully in terms of a completely open ecosystem where you can actually pick up anybody's radio and anybody's RAN components and put them together, but we are beginning to see some smaller ecosystems mushroom or grow in that area where you now do have the flexibility. Now, what does Open RAN bring to the table? You can deploy, you don't need to be in a greenfield environment to deploy Open RAN. You can choose to deploy Open RAN in an environment which is brownfield as well. So for example, if you're lighting up new services, if you're lighting up small cell capabilities, if you're lighting up, if you're looking to revamp your infrastructure or upgrade or get new frequency bands deployed, you can certainly look at Open RAN as a concept to go deploy in those areas. You needn't disturb the existing infrastructure. And then over a period of time, as you start to deliver more new services through that cloud platform that is closer to the subscriber, you can start to then convert over your existing RAN capabilities to Open RAN. Now, what are some of the unique capabilities that Open RAN really enables or brings? Well, guess what? When you have a compute platform that's deployed to host Open RAN capabilities, you can now use that same compute platform to deliver edge services. That's exactly the reason why someone like Verizon, despite the fact that they had completely virtualized their LTE core, started to now revamp their infrastructure again to go cloud native, first of all, on the core side, distribute that out to many data centers across the infrastructure, and then now start to relook at, and they already have a 5G deployment, by the way, on millimeter wave band based on appliances. I've started to relook at the RAN exactly to deliver these kind of new innovative services. So really, it's an opportunity, in my opinion, in terms of looking at that particular infrastructure, providing that level of innovation that the CTOs have just expressed and want, to be able to deploy a platform that allows you to be completely open with open APIs. You leverage open source code, leverage the capabilities that exist, and then provide that enterprise grade services that you need to provide in order to be profitable.
Sure. Thanks, Azhar. I think that was extremely. I think your example on Verizon put everything in a good context. We have. I mean, I think the discussion is absolutely going on the right track, and we are nearly close to our time. But I would like to ask one closing question to our esteemed panelists. I'll start with Jagbir. We've spoken enough about integration. We've spoken enough about open API and the role that it is going to play in the future. We've spoken about as a service and various other operating models that are going to come. But all this is only possible through network automation. The role that network automation is going to play cannot be undermined. Can you summarize one key priority? I'm sure there are multiple, but one priority that you might want to drive or you're already driving to effectively enable network automation. And when I say network automation, it's not only network and also automation within the organization, between the IT and the network environment. And what kind of priorities are you driving in this area?
Okay, Puru, thank you. I think I'll take 1 minute extra to make this
Sure.
5G really like successful. I want to leave the message through the IMC that I think having the spectrum prices, which are the reasonable price, I think is very important and critical for the 5G success. Number two, maybe some policies from the government around the fiber sharing of the existing fiber, as well as going forward the building fiber. I think maybe one-stop shop solution for the ROW. All operators sharing it, I think will make the infrastructure costs more affordable for everyone and faster for the industry in terms of deploying 5G. Third one, I think Randeep covered and Sham also covered on. Like when we are talking about the services, we are 5G all around the enterprise, 5G all around the IoT, M2M, and all these devices. If you see today, like IoT sensors, we have the 8-10 million customers in Vodafone Idea. None of the sensors is actually the security compliant. All these, like sensors which are there, all the M2M devices which are there, they don't actually follow any security compliances. So I think the 5G is going to have the big challenge on the security compliances and ensuring that people are, or the operators and the enterprise customers are actually protected from the security point of view. So there should be a together one, like a policy along with the government and all the operators. How do we ensure that cyber security is taken care for the 5G deployment? I think these three policies. So one is the spectrum, second is the fiber sharing, and third is the security around. It's going to be very complex to manage the millions of the M2M and IoT devices and still comply to the security. So now with this, I think in terms of the automation, just to let you know, in Vodafone Idea, we have the network IT, everything and digital part of the CTO. So by design, it is not only like Vodafone UK, etc., even Vodafone India. So everything, for example, in my case, is like automation, digital development, all the software development, IT and network is all together. So we are driving together internally, at least, to ensuring that we are moving in steps to drive the automation to be ready for 5G.
Thanks, Jagbir. I think some of the points that you mentioned on the challenges are extremely important and relevant, and they are being contextualized and also presented in a different forum as well. But I think I appreciate some of the points that you mentioned. Randeep, in the interest of time, could I request you to give your concluding remarks on some of your priorities to address some of the challenges that the organization and the industry is facing to roll out 5G, as well as some of the priorities that you might have in the next few months as we go up for the 5G options.
So first of all, I I echo back what Jagbir said, that these are real industry challenges, and if these are sorted, it will make 5G available across India at a much faster pace. It will follow normal path; it will become available, but the fundamental changes in certain policies, especially infra availability, open infra, things like that, will make really it go faster. Uh, Coming on 5G being made available, I would say two parts. One is automation would be very key. I mean, many technologies where we have, when we launched 3G handsets were just ramping up, and slowly the networks got filled up. And when we launched 4G, same thing happened. 4G handsets were ramping up, got filled up. 5G, there are already 25 to 50 million, depends on who's giving the estimate, handsets in India. So if it gets launched after 2 quarters or 3 quarters, I would imagine this number would be in serious high, uh, I mean, number. So that means those users will day zero start a 5G service. So going green on 5G experience will be very key. There will be no time for operators to optimize, tune, troubleshoot. So I would say automation from that perspective and making a robust lab testing and fixing those features will be very important. I will also like to add one more message along with what Jagbir said, is that the device ecosystem has to also play to Indian bands. It should not be that there are certain bands left out and subsequently the device, early movers of devices, then later feel that, oh, my device doesn't have this band, this was probably used in India. We are talking to them, they are very much conscious of it, and they're committing to bring this. But this is also another element which will also help. I would want to give you an example. Early 4G devices did not have VoLTE. So the guy who bought the first 4G device after 1 year left out, hey, I don't have a phone with VoLTE. So similarly, we need to make sure that the 5G devices come with all the bands and all the features supported as needed, as a mature 5G service will run. But overall, automation, yes, will be very key to deliver a go green service when 5G gets lit, because very first day we'll have many customers on 5G using that service and making a first opinion about service. We have to make it a good experience for our customers when we launch.
Thanks, Randeep. Sham, if I may come to you, your closing thoughts on your expectation that you have not only from the ecosystem partners, but also from the larger industry. Also, if you have any suggestions on some of the challenges that might need to be addressed before the launch of 5G.
See, I think this single window policy, which we have all been talking as an industry, wherein permissions to get the physical infrastructure in place, permission to get power, permissions in electricity board connections in place, all of that, I think, will play a very important role. So that's the first policy level expectation. We've all spoken about spectrum pricing, and we know historically the amount of investments that are needed in a country like us. And that has to be taken into account when we're talking about spectrum pricing. So I think it's under consultation. I'm sure government and TRI will come up with something which is very, very rational, unlike some of the spectrum price which we're still kind of reeling under the cost. That's the second point. There's some positive directions there with 30-year plan and with 5-year proposed moratorium and all of that. But let's see when it actually comes out how it will be. From a deploying, I think one important point Randeep touched upon is 5G will have to hit the road running. And to do this, I think, and the 4 fundamental tenets, you're talking about the right product, the right plan, the right people, and right processes. All of it needs a lot of pre-work. Understanding of what products are going to go through, understanding what kind of plan, in building, outdoor, frequency modeling, coverage modeling, capacity modeling, all of that will come into picture. And then the processes on one important phrase I want to borrow from Abhay is about automation by design. And I think unless that is kind of totally fully baked into the whole process, I think you cannot do it from outside, at least from 5G, I'm convinced. So this was the third. And fourth is people. And I think that's one underestimated part. I think with these many technology changes happening, if the technology, product, and market facing workforces are not clearly upskilled towards what is going to hit them when this whole kind of 5G ecosystem gets loose with the right set of devices, I think we'll not be able to get the full value. So all these 4 engines need to work in sync, in harmony. And I think if we can do this over next 2-3 quarters, we are all looking forward for a great digital India story which 5G will usher in.
Absolutely, Shyam. I think you summed it up very well. Magnus, if I could hear your closing thoughts, you've heard some of our leaders in India and also your peers in the industry actually talk about the Indian context of implementation of 5G, and you gave some examples. Any kind of suggestions or recommendations that you might have in the context of implementation in India as your closing remarks?
Fair and reasonable spectrum licensing so that it encourages fast and wide rollout in India. India will benefit from that, consumers and enterprises. Secondly, ecosystem, and I emphasize perhaps a little bit more the enterprise ecosystem, industrial sensors and measurement tools, etc., needs to come up on 5G. Here, I think again, great opportunity for many Indian enterprises to step in and have export possibilities. And then, lastly, I also encourage embracive and enabling regulation. 5G unleashes a lot of power here to provide services for consumers and enterprises. In COVID times, I'm sure many enterprises in the future with workforces working from home will want to ensure that their employees have a good working environment. Slicing enables this. Well, we don't want to go back to where the world was 7, 8 years ago, looking at network neutrality and so forth. We need to have slicing. We need to have the regulatory support for that to allow the right performance for the right services. So clarity in the market on the regulatory side and enabling conditions. Sorry, yeah.
Thank you, Magnus. Abhay, you summed up the priorities extremely well, so I'm not going to ask you anything around those. But I would like to ask one final question from, we spoke about, I think Randeep spoke about device security. From your experience, considering that from an OEM perspective, you have been focusing on the element of trust in any kind of deployment. How do you see the role of device security and its integration with some of the hardware that you are going to deploy work very effectively, considering that the standards are not very well established and uniform? So, any kind of closing remarks that you might have on some of the practices that you might want to get implemented over a period of time? You're on mute, Abhay. Sorry.
So thanks, Guru. Security has become a very, very important consideration. And what we have seen globally happening is every, particularly not in case of NSA, but in case of every SA RFP that we have seen, comes up with a comprehensive critical security requirement. And those are based on all GDPR standards, or like Singapore has their own methodologies and standards that they have put in. So every one of them is asking for 100% compliance, and that not only talks about the network functions that are getting into the system, but also the ecosystem, the larger ecosystem, the devices and other things. How do you make sure that they are they are protected in a very proper fashion? So just like we talked about automation by design, it is also security by design during the course of deployment of the core network, which is coming in play, and certificate management and other things which are very, very critical from device security perspective is also being considered by every operator when they are implementing 5G as of now. So I can talk about more about it, but I think due to the paucity of time, security is one fundamental pillar which has to go in straight away along with 5G deployment.
Thank you, Abhay. Azhar, your closing thoughts. You've heard a lot about some of the challenges that need to get addressed. From your perspective, what are those? What is that one particular priority or challenge that you might want the industry and also any of the ecosystem partners or operators to address?
Thank you, Puru. By the way, I'd really like to thank the other panelists. I think it was wonderful to hear from you directly. From my point of view, I think it was established very clearly that cloud is the key, imperative. I think collaboration around innovation, leveraging open source, and 5G is all about scale. So ensuring that automation really addresses that, building based on driving your infrastructure and your services based on data, which means that now you can actually provide that innovation very quickly. So from my point of view, if we were to really relook at that particular infrastructure and not look at it from the point of view of your traditional operating model, but from a new cloud-based operating model, upgrading your skill sets because cloud is here to stay. So it is important that we learn that sooner than later. And particularly in India, India is a powerhouse of software. So you're leveraging that particular software strength that India has to be able to actually collaborate further. You leverage the power of open source to actually bring together a set of services that's really important, and that can only happen on a cloud platform. So those would be my concluding thoughts.
Thank you, all the panelists. I think it was a wonderful session. Some of your thoughts are extremely important and are going to change the face of telecommunication industry in India. With that note, I would like to thank each of the panelists. It's been an extremely it has been my privilege to actually host this session. Thank you very much, and have a great day. Bye.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.